The highway never sleeps, but something else does. Out here, where headlights vanish into the black and truck stops hum like ghosts, people disappear, and no one ever finds out why. These are the true stories truckers still whisper about on empty roads. Welcome to Nazir Fears, where every mile has a story, and every story leaves something behind. Story 1. Mile marker 313, Amarillo, Texas. Truck driver. Raymond Cole had been hauling freight across the Texas Panhandle for almost 20 years, and he thought he'd seen it all. Twisters tearing up the horizon, dust storms swallowing the sun, and miles of empty road that looked the same no matter how far you drove. But the night he passed mile marker 313 was the one that made him quit for good. It was early March, cold enough for frost to creep along the edges of his windshield, and the CB chatter had gone dead somewhere around Amarillo. Raymond's rig, an old Peterbilt with a faded blue cab, rumbled steadily down I-40 as the clock ticked past midnight. He hadn't seen another set of headlights in 20 minutes, which was strange, even for that stretch. He was listening to a country station fading in and out through static when a voice cut through the noise on his radio. Low, cracked, and almost mechanical, saying, "Breaker 19, you see her yet?" Raymond frowned, adjusted the dial, and asked back, "See who?" But there was only static. He figured it was a prank, maybe some rookie messing with truckers on an open channel, but the unease stuck with him. A few miles later, his headlights caught something pale on the shoulder. Looked like a person, maybe a woman, standing just past the guardrail. Raymond slowed down automatically, heart pounding, because anyone out there at this hour was either in trouble or trouble themselves. The figure didn't move as his truck approached. When he finally stopped and rolled his window down, the woman stepped into the beam of his headlights. She looked maybe mid-30s, wearing a torn white dress that didn't belong in this kind of cold. Her long black hair matted against her face. She didn't flag him down or speak. She just stared, eyes wide, like she was caught in a nightmare. Raymond leaned out, called, "You okay, ma'am? You need help?" But before he could finish, she vanished. Not walked away. Gone. One blink, and there was nothing in the light except the empty road. Raymond sat frozen, engine idling, breath fogging the cab. He got out anyway, flashlight in hand, scanning the shoulder. The only thing he found was a single wet footprint in the dirt, too small for a grown woman. He climbed back in, locked the doors, and tried to convince himself his eyes were playing tricks. But when he looked at the clock, it read 2:13 a.m. An hour later than it should have been. He drove the rest of that night gripping the wheel so hard his knuckles ached. When dawn broke, he pulled into a diner outside Groom, Texas, and told another driver named Earl Patterson what he'd seen. Earl just looked at him funny and said, "You passed 313, didn't you? Should have kept rolling." He told Raymond about a wreck 15 years earlier. Family sedan rear-ended by a tanker at that exact marker. Only the daughter survived, a 7-year-old named Lila Monroe. She walked 5 miles, barefoot in the cold, before collapsing by the guardrail. Died before anyone found her. Truckers said she still walked that stretch, trying to flag down her parents' car. Raymond didn't believe in ghost stories, but that name, Lila, stuck in his head like a splinter. He finished his coffee, shrugged it off, and got back on the road, promising himself he wouldn't slow down again. 2 nights later, he was back on the same route. The sky looked bruise purple, and thunder rolled somewhere far off. Around 1 a.m., his dashboard clock flickered, radio went silent, and his headlights dimmed for half a second. Then his CB crackled to life. "Breaker 19, you see her yet?" The same voice, same static, same chill crawling up his spine. Raymond shouted, "Who is this?" But only got a whisper back, something that sounded like mile marker 313. That's when he saw her again. Same white dress, same black hair, standing dead center of his lane. He slammed the brakes, truck screeching sideways, trailer fishtailing across the asphalt. When the rig finally stopped, his heart was hammering so hard he could barely breathe. The road ahead was empty. No woman, but his headlights now pointed straight at the marker sign. 313. Raymond sat there trembling, staring at it, until his radio spoke again. His own voice echoing back to him, repeating, "You okay, ma'am? You need help?" He left the CB off for good after that. By morning, his rear tires were streaked with something dark. Looked like mud, but smelled like iron. He washed it off at the next stop. Didn't tell anyone. But the nightmare started the following week. He'd wake up in his sleeper cab, drenched in sweat, convinced someone was standing outside the window. Once, in Oklahoma City, he swore he saw a handprint on the inside of his windshield. He started sleeping with the engine running, just to drown out the silence. A month later, another driver on the same route, Chuck Daniels, went missing. His rig was found idling on the shoulder near 313. Driver's door wide open, radio still hissing. When they checked the dashcam footage, the last thing it showed was a blur of white fabric crossing in front of his headlights. Raymond tried to quit after that. He took a local delivery job, swore he'd never run long haul again. But one night, he got a call from dispatch asking if he could cover a last-minute route. Amarillo to Oklahoma City. Same highway. He hesitated, said no, but the dispatcher insisted. "We need someone who knows that stretch." Against his better judgment, he agreed. He told himself he'd drive straight through, no stops. But fate doesn't bargain. Somewhere past Groom, his GPS lost signal, and before he realized it, the marker appeared in his high beams again. 313. The air felt electric. The radio turned on by itself, playing a child's lullaby warped by static. Raymond whispered, "Lila?" even though he didn't believe it. The sound stopped instantly. Then a small voice answered, "You stopped for me before. Why didn't you take me home?" Every light in the cab died at once. The engine coughed, sputtered, and shut down. He grabbed his flashlight, aimed it out the window, and there she was, standing inches away from the glass, her eyes wide, tears cutting clean lines down her dirt-streaked face. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Raymond reached for the ignition, hand shaking, but the truck wouldn't start. The flashlight flickered, and for a split second he saw another figure behind her. An older man, his chest crushed, his head tilted at an impossible angle. Then darkness. When the lights returned, both were gone, and the cab smelled faintly of burning rubber. Raymond drove until sunrise, never looking back. When he finally reached the next truck stop, his odometer showed 666 extra miles, though he hadn't driven more than 60. He called dispatch, quit on the spot, and left the rig behind. 2 weeks later, a rookie driver took over that same Peterbilt for the same route. He never made it past mile marker 313. The police found the truck idling with the driver's seat empty, but on the windshield, someone had traced 3 small handprints in condensation, one larger, two child-sized. Locals say if you drive that road alone after midnight, your radio will whisper before the lights start flickering, asking the same question. Breaker 19, you see her yet? And if you ever stop to answer, well, they say Lila Monroe finally finds her ride home. Story 2, The Night Shift Gas Stop. Flagstaff, Arizona. For 10 years, Caleb Jennings had been running overnight freight through the Arizona desert, hauling produce from Bakersfield to Albuquerque and back. He liked the solitude, the hum of the engine, the open sky, and the way the stars looked like ice scattered across black velvet. But the desert could play tricks on a man's mind when the highway got too quiet. One summer night, somewhere outside Flagstaff, he pulled into a 24-hour gas stop he'd never seen before. A rundown station called Henderson's Fuel and Dine, with a single flickering neon sign and a row of dead bumps. His fuel gauge was dropping fast, and the next major town was 50 miles away, so he figured he'd risk it. He parked his Kenworth beside the building, left the engine idling, and stepped out into air that smelled like rain and rust. The place looked abandoned. No cars, no sound, no insects even. But the lights were on inside, buzzing faintly. He pushed the glass door open. A small bell jingled, and the first thing he noticed was the chill. It was cold in there, refrigerator cold, like someone had left the AC running in the middle of the desert. Behind the counter stood a man in a pale blue uniform with a stitched name tag that read Hank. Hank didn't look up, just stared at the register screen like he'd been doing it for years. Caleb cleared his throat and asked if the pumps were still working. Hank nodded slowly, said, "Cash only." His voice was flat, distant, like a recording played backward. Caleb handed him a 50 and stepped back outside to start fueling, but when he turned around, the pump was already ticking, hose hanging loose like someone had beaten him to it. He looked toward the cab, empty, then back at the window. Hank was still standing there, staring straight ahead, but now the lights above him were flickering in rhythm, on and off, like a heartbeat. Caleb froze, felt his pulse sync with the lights, and for one dizzy second, he swore he could see his reflection in the glass moving a half-second slower than his own. He shook it off, told himself it was exhaustion. Truckers hallucinate when they go too long without sleep. Everybody knows that. He climbed back into the cab, started to log the fuel on his tablet, and glanced at the dash clock. 2:09 a.m. When he looked up again, the gas station lights were off, completely dark. No sign, no flicker, just an empty desert lot lit only by his headlights. He leaned forward, blinking. Then, as he watched, every light came back on at once. Only now, the sign didn't say Henderson's Fuel and Dine. It said Jennings Gas and Dine. His own last name. The old neon buzzed like a hornet nest, and somewhere behind him, the CB crackled alive. Breaker 19. Long way from home. Ain't you, Caleb? He grabbed the mic, shouted into static, but the voice just laughed. Low, distorted, and wet-sounding, like someone gargling gravel. He threw the mic down, slammed the truck into gear, and peeled out of the lot. Dust whipped behind him. Stars above spun like a carousel. And for a minute, he thought he'd escaped. But a few miles later, his headlights caught movement in the mirrors. Another truck following close. No lights, just the outline of a cab and trailer hugging the center line. He tried to speed up, but the rig stayed right behind him, matching every turn. Then it flashed its brights, two blinding white eyes in the dark, and his dashboard flickered, gauges spinning wildly. His radio came alive again, Hank's voice whispering now. "You didn't pay for your fill, son." Caleb shouted back, "Keep it." But the voice didn't stop. "You always gotta pay. Henderson's rule." The name Henderson clicked. He'd seen it on an old trucking forum years ago. A driver named Frank Henderson vanished on that same route in 1999. They found his truck parked at a gas stop with the lights still on, but no trace of him. Locals said the station burned down a week later, but travelers still saw its glow from the highway sometimes. Caleb didn't believe that stuff. Not until now. He gripped the wheel, pushed the truck to 80, 90, praying the ghost rig behind him would fade. But it didn't. It followed him all the way to the state line. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. No lights, no rumble, nothing but open desert and the faint smell of burnt diesel. By dawn, Caleb reached a real truck stop near Winslow. The clerk there, a young guy named Luis Ortega, blinked when Caleb stumbled in, pale and shaking. Luis said, "Man, where'd you come from? You look like you saw a ghost." Caleb just muttered, "Henderson Station," and Luis frowned. "That place burned down years ago, dude." Caleb didn't argue. He bought coffee, washed his face, and sat at the window watching the sun bleed over the sand. He could see his truck parked outside. And behind it, reflected faintly in the glass, a second rig that wasn't really there. He closed his eyes, told himself to breathe. When he looked again, the reflection was gone. He kept driving after that, but he never took the Flagstaff route again. Still, things kept happening. Every few weeks, his fuel gauge would dip overnight, even when the truck hadn't moved. Once, he found a paper receipt tucked under his wiper blade. It said, "Henderson's Fuel and Dine, 120 gallons paid cash. No date, no location. Just his own signature at the bottom." He tore it up, threw it away, but the next morning, another one appeared on his seat. Same handwriting, same signature. He started keeping his tank full just to avoid stopping anywhere remote. 3 months later, while hauling freight through New Mexico, his dispatcher patched through a call from a driver asking to talk to Caleb Jennings. The voice on the line was cracked, but familiar. "You left your change," it said, followed by static. The call ended before Caleb could answer. He checked the call log. No number, no origin. Just private. That night the gas smell filled his cab so strong, he thought something had ruptured. He pulled over, grabbed his flashlight, and checked the tank. No leak. But on the chrome step under the door, smeared in something black, were the words, "Pay what you owe." He drove straight through to Albuquerque, left the trailer at the depot, and told dispatch he was done with long hauls. But even after he quit, it followed him. Sometimes when he drove his pickup into town after dark, he'd see a glow on the horizon. A faint neon flicker, like an old sign trying to light up. Other nights he'd wake to the sound of a diesel engine idling outside his house, low and patient. Once, when his wife Megan went to the porch to check, she came back pale, saying, "There's nobody there. But the smell, Caleb, it smells like gas." The last anyone heard from Caleb was 2 years later. He was heading east to visit family when he called his brother from the road, said he was stopping for fuel near Flagstaff. His brother reminded him about Henderson's, told him to keep driving. Caleb just laughed weakly and said, "It's not the same place, looks brand new." Then the line went dead, mid-sentence. His truck was found 2 days later on a frontage road off I-40, tank empty, doors locked from the inside. The receipt on the dash read, Henderson's Fuel and Dine, full tank, paid in full. Locals say that on hot summer nights when the wind dies, you can still see the blue glow of that station out past the desert hills, flickering like it's waiting for another driver to stop by. And if you ever do, and the man at the counter says, cash only, you pay, no matter what. Because some debts, as every trucker learns, don't end when the road does. Story 3. The Bridge over Blackwater Creek, Mississippi. They called it Blackwater Bridge, a rusted 2-lane span that cut over a swampy creek just outside Greenville, Mississippi. And every trucker who'd been driving the southern routes long enough had a story about it. Most of them were harmless. Strange lights, animals that didn't move right, ghost cars appearing in the fog. But none hit as hard as what happened to Earl Whitman, a 37-year-old long-haul driver who'd been on the road since he was 17. Earl wasn't superstitious. He'd seen accidents, crime scenes, and enough weird people at truck stops to make him numb to just about anything. But even he couldn't explain what happened that humid June night in 2016 when his GPS rerouted him through Highway 82 right toward the Blackwater Bridge. He'd left Baton Rouge late, hauling machine parts up to Memphis, planning to grab coffee near Clarksdale before dawn. Around 2:30 a.m., the road went quiet. No lights, no other trucks. Just the hum of cicadas and the occasional slap of bugs against the windshield. The air felt heavy, like the whole world was holding its breath. His radio had gone fuzzy an hour earlier, and his CB picked up nothing but a faint hiss. Then, through the dark, he saw a dim glow ahead. A pair of taillights, maybe half a mile up. Grateful for the company, he pushed the throttle and started closing the distance. But the closer he got, the stranger it looked. The lights were too low, too red, almost like lanterns swaying in the air. He slowed, thinking it might be a car stuck halfway across the bridge. As he rolled closer, his high beam swept over twisted steel rails, patches of water misting up from the creek below. And then he saw her. A woman in a torn white dress, standing dead center on the bridge, one hand raised like she was trying to flag him down. Earl slammed the brakes, trailer fishtailing. The truck screeched to a stop about 20 feet from her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she stepped closer, barefoot, soaked to the knees, hair plastered to her face. Earl rolled the window down just enough to shout, "Ma'am, you okay?" Her voice came soft through the rain, like she'd been crying for hours. "My car went off the bridge. My baby's still inside." His stomach dropped. He grabbed his flashlight, jumped down from the cab, and ran toward her. But the air felt wrong. Too still, too cold. The swamp smell vanished, replaced by something metallic, like old pennies and burnt oil. He reached the edge of the bridge and shined the light over the guardrail. The beam hit black water. Smooth, silent. No car. No ripples. Nothing. He turned back to tell her they'd need to call for help. But she was gone. Just gone. Heart pounding. He swept the bridge with the flashlight. The only thing he saw was a small blue pacifier lying near the center line. He bent down, picked it up. It was warm, like someone had just been holding it. A shiver ran up his arm, and before he could react, his flashlight flickered out. Then he heard it. A splash from below. He leaned over the railing again and saw bubbles break in the surface, followed by a faint glow under the water. Two round lights rising slowly, like headlights from a car crawling up from the creek bed. They kept rising until the glow filled the whole span of the bridge, washing the truck in ghostly white light. Earl stumbled back, dropped the pacifier, and bolted for the cab. He slammed the door, started the engine, and floored it off the bridge. His mirrors showed nothing behind him. No lights, no woman, just fog curling over the rails. He didn't stop until he reached a diner 20 miles north, a small place called Rosie's Truck Haven that stayed open all night for passing drivers. When he stumbled in, drenched and pale, Rosie herself, a big woman with kind eyes, who'd run the place 30 years, took one look and said, "You saw her, didn't you?" He froze. "Who?" "The lady on the bridge," she said quietly, pouring him black coffee. "You're not the first." Then she told him the story. Back in 1993, a young mother named Lydia Moore lost control of her sedan during a storm and drove off Blackwater Bridge with her 6-month-old daughter in the back seat. Rescue teams found the car, but the baby was gone. Locals said Lydia went back every night for a week, wading into the creek calling her baby's name, until one morning they found her body tangled in the reeds. After that, truckers started seeing her, soaked, crying, waving for help. Most just drove past, but the few who stopped either quit trucking or went missing soon after. Rosie said the last driver, who claimed to see her, left his rig parked outside and walked back toward the bridge before sunrise. They never found him. Earl didn't believe in ghosts, but he couldn't shake what he'd seen. He stayed at Rosie's until daylight, then decided to drive back toward Greenville to prove to himself it was just fog and fatigue. When he reached the bridge again, the water below was calm, almost mirror-like. He parked, climbed out, and looked over the side. Nothing, just the reflection of his truck shimmering in the black water. But when he turned to get back in, he froze. There was a small handprint on his passenger window. Tiny, wet, fresh. He rubbed it off with his sleeve, telling himself it was condensation. But when he climbed into the cab, the radio turned on by itself, static hissing through the speakers. Then a voice, faint, childlike, whispered, "Daddy." He slammed the power off, jammed the gear shift, and didn't stop driving until he crossed into Tennessee. That night, he parked at a crowded rest area, engine still running, lights on bright, but even there, he couldn't escape it. The smell of swamp water filled the cab, and when he glanced in the mirror, he saw her, Lydia Moore, standing just behind the trailer, staring straight at him through the glass, holding the same blue pacifier. He blinked, and she was gone. The next morning, another driver found him slumped over the wheel, engine idling, eyes open but empty. Paramedics said he'd had a heart attack. But Rosie didn't believe that. When they towed the truck back to her lot, she saw what no one else did. On the inside of the windshield, written in tiny watery letters, were the words, "She's not alone anymore." Since then, truckers who pass through Blackwater after midnight still see strange lights under the bridge, moving slow and steady, like something trapped beneath the surface is still trying to come up for air. Some say it's headlights from Lydia's car. Others say it's the glow of a trucker's rig sunk deep in the creek bed beside hers. Either way, they all agree on one thing. If you ever see a woman waving for help on that bridge, don't stop. Just drive. Because out there in the dark, not every cry for help is meant to be answered.